morning, everybody. So just to quickly introduce myself, so Sharon Breeze, I'm a solution architect at Coreview. I work in the pre-sales team, so I work with our salespeople internally. I also work closely with our channel partners and our distributors like Hermitage. And thank you for coming today. As we said, we're going to talk about Microsoft 365 and managing it. And these are the typical personas in your company who are managing 365. And as we all know, 365 is a very complex environment. It has lots of moving parts, and with that becomes a few challenges. Number of workloads. Again, Microsoft 365 is an evolving platform. Microsoft are continuing to add more and more functionality, which is great as someone who is using those licenses, or I'm an end user. The problem as an administrator is managing all of those different platforms as well. So Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams Phone, Viva, Copilot. Again, all of those workloads need managing. We also have to think about the tenant itself that we have on the Microsoft side. We have those configurations that are there, the configurations and the policies that are there to protect the tenant, to protect the data within it. Intune policies, conditional access policies, my DLP policies, the policies that are there to ensure that the right data is leaving my organization and that the right people have access to that data within my environment as well. There are lots of configurations to manage. They all have different settings within those configurations, and we need to make sure that we get those right. Admin centers. Again, because Microsoft 365 has evolved over time, we have multiple different admin centers that we have to use to manage Microsoft 365, whether that's Exchange, again, Teams, Entra ID. So 18 different places that I would need to go to manage. And again, it's a moving platform. Microsoft are moving things between admin centers, they're renaming things as well. So again, that's a challenge in itself of knowing where to go to manage a particular setting or a particular object within the tenant. Evolving APIs, again, so Microsoft is continuing to update the ways that we would communicate with the tenant. So PowerShell commandlets, Graph APIs, they're continuing to change. So again, if I have any kind of scripting that I'm using, I have to potentially update and keep those scripts updated to be able to keep up with those changes as well on the Microsoft side. My administration roles. So these are roles that are predefined. They give me permissions as an administrator within the tenant to perform certain actions. Predefined roles, as I said, by Microsoft, they're going to give me a predefined set of actions for me to take. The downside of that is they are predefined. It makes it difficult for me to delegate down potentially. If I wanted to delegate down a particular task to the help desk, I would have to also delegate down all of the tasks that are included in that role. Again, so I have a couple of choices in terms of too many permissions or I don't delegate at all. We also have customers who are moving to the cloud. They still have on-premise environments. They still have on-premise Active Directory. I would say 90% of the customers that we talk to, if not more, still have hybrid environment. Again, they have on-premise Active Directory. They may still have on-premise Exchange. So managing the tenant and the on-prem environment as well is the added complexity. We also have customers with multiple tenants, either because they've acquired companies over time and each of those companies has a tenant that's come with them and they're having to manage those tenants together, or there are data sovereignty requirements again. So I have a tenant in a particular country, so I can make sure that that data stays in that country as well. So again, the issues we see in managing one tenant then become multiplied by having multiple tenants to manage as well. Entra ID apps. Again, more and more applications are requiring permissions in my tenant to read data, to take action on or to help me manage my tenant. Management of those applications as well. Do I have the right level of permissions on those apps? Or do I have secrets or certificates that are about to expire. Who owns those applications? Again, they are a challenge in themselves. Midnight Blizzard attack that we saw on Microsoft, those apps that were effectively had too many permissions, allowed somebody to compromise that test tenant and then take action from there. So again, being able to monitor those applications that are there, check the permissions that they have, check that they are still in use effectively. And the final one I sort of alluded to already, PowerShell. Those admin centers that we have give me the ability to perform certain tasks, but not all of them. So then I'm going to have to use scripting, whether that's PowerShell or Graph. That in itself comes with some challenges. Now I have to be able to write those scripts to begin with. I have to have those skills to do so. I have to maintain those scripts again, those evolving commandlets and the commandlets being deprecated, having to maintain those over time. I can't delegate those down to somebody to run. They may not have the skills, first of all, but I also wouldn't want them to then start changing that script and taking action on there. And again, these are some of those impacts that I talked about. So too many admin roles. First of all, again, if I want to delegate down to my help desk, maybe to HR, maybe to a local IT team, I have to give them some administration permissions. And we see very many roles assigned to operators, and again, possibly too high in terms of permissions that we've given them. The configurations of my tenants, again, like I said, the policies that are there to manage my tenant and to protect the data within it. Managing those first of all and getting them set up and getting them configured based on best practice is challenging, but we then also have to consider change. Again, Microsoft will make a change to a policy, maybe an admin makes a change to a policy. Worst case scenario, I have a sort of a cyber attack and somebody is changing my policies. They are making my tenant vulnerable effectively. I'm potentially opening up my data. I'm opening up access to people outside of the organization. So being able to look for those changes is difficult. And again, when you bring in multiple tenants, that gets even bigger. Sharing, again, Microsoft 365 is a collaboration platform designed so that users can communicate with each other. They can collaborate on their documents together. They can share information between themselves, and it's understanding who's sharing what effectively. Am I sharing any of my content externally? And if I am sharing content externally, it may be just for a short period of time. Am I sure that I am removing those permissions, once they're no longer needed? ROI, again, we all know about the pandemic. We saw many customers moving to Teams, working from home, moving, before they were ready in some cases. So they pushed out Teams very quickly. They didn't necessarily have any governance in place. Lots of Teams sites that just got created, and now there's many customers still trying to clear up what's going on there. All of that comes with a cost in terms of licensing, I guess, in terms of storage that we might be looking at as well. Licenses as well. If we see that licenses are assigned to a user, do we know they are fully utilizing everything that's available to them in terms of the workloads that come with it with a license? Do we know, is the user even using a license? Again, that's one thing that we see is, rather than recovering licenses from users that aren't in use, customers go out and buy more licenses. And again, it can be quite difficult to get that visibility natively on the Microsoft side. Productivity, again, as an admin team, if I'm having to manually perform actions, if I want to onboard a user, there's potentially many admin centers that I need to go to. I might need to run scripts, do particular things. It can be a very slow process. If I want to do an onboarding or an offboarding of a user, or indeed, any of the other processes that we're running, looking for information, identifying action that needs to be taken, and then taking that action can be very slow. Delegation I've talked about. Again, if I wanted to delegate down, I have the option of potentially giving too many permissions away, or I don't delegate at all, and I keep those actions within my second or my third line team. They become a bottleneck. of waiting for potentially, quite mundane tasks to be done, because the customer just feels that they can't delegate that down to their first line. And then customer reporting, again, like I said, there's lots of information available in the Microsoft Admin Centers, but often it can be in different places. So it can be a challenge to get that data, get it from those sources, bring it into Excel or Power BI, and then collate it and get that visibility. So again, it can be difficult to get that understanding first of all. And if I am exporting that data to do that reporting, it's already out of date as soon as I sort of exported it, because it's not real-time data. Again, so these are just some statistics that we have in terms of those areas. So as I said, we see many customers with admins, or too many administration, too many admin roles, I should say, assigned to their users, just to be able to do what they need to in that tenant. ROI, like I said, because customers don't necessarily get as much visibility as they'd like in terms of license usage, how users are consuming licenses. They feel that they're not getting a good ROI on Microsoft 365. And then that onboarding process, as I said, for our more mature organizations, we've seen customers that have huge onboarding steps. I'm creating a user, I'm assigning them some licenses, I'm adding them to some groups, again, depending on their role. I am maybe setting a policy on them for teams or whatever. And again, multiple steps that they're going through. And again, often they're doing that manually, or they're doing it via scripts. So this is Coreview. And just to set the scene, we have two products that I'm going to show you today. Our long-term aim, so sort of early next year, we're hoping that we'll bring them together into one platform. But currently two products. So Coreview or CoreSuite is our day-to-day management platform. It's where we are able to report on a tenant or tenants. If you have more than one tenant, we're able to manage the tenant very efficiently and very intuitively, so we can delegate down to end users. We're able to automate some of those processes that we talked about, again, in terms of the workflows that we might be running, or processes that I might be running. And we're also able to delegate in a very granular way. And I'll show you that when I get to the platform. The other project that we have is called Coreview Configuration Manager. This was an acquisition that we made just over a year ago. Used to be called Simian Cloud. And Configuration Manager is looking at the configurations of my tenant. So we're backing them up, first of all, on a regular basis. We're able to compare. Again, I can look for changes to my configurations very quickly. I can roll back some of those changes. And again, we can do that across multiple tenants. And I'll talk about a baseline later as well of having my golden tenant, effectively, my blueprint of how I would have my tenant configured in a perfect world. So again, these are some things I've just talked about. So drift. So as I mentioned before, configuring my tenant is time consuming, but that is, it's not set once and forget. Those configurations change. Microsoft will push out a new change potentially. Maybe they'll introduce a new policy. And again, if my administrators are making a change, I want to be able to know about those changes, and I want to be able to roll them back if necessary. And like I say, have notification that something has changed. Least privilege access. Again, as an administrator, rather than giving me one of the admin roles, within Coreview, we can get very granular in terms of how we delegate down to an administrator. So it could be you only want me to reset passwords and nothing else, so we can delegate that down at a task level. We can delegate a workflow. So maybe I give my HR team a workflow for an emergency termination. They have an employee that is leaving and they want to disable their account straight away. That is something we can delegate down. And again, only that workflow to the HR personnel. We also have what we call a virtual tenant, and I'll show you those later as well. So the idea behind the virtual tenant is controlling which users I can manage. So again, if I'm a global company and I've got a team in a particular country and they want to manage their own users, we can delegate it down to them. They can manage their users and only their users. They'll have no visibility of the rest of the tenant. Again, local IT teams and being able to manage a subset of the tenant, we can delegate down to those virtual tenants as well. I've mentioned the drift, so the policies, my tenant level configurations, looking for changes in those. But there's also, again, my day-to-day management. Very often, we talk to customers and their onboarding process is fine. They've got, they've got a process for everything that they need to do to onboard a user. Offboarding, not sometimes as well managed. People leave the organization, people don't leave, people don't let the IT team know, and so that account is just staying there. Again, guest accounts that may be there that I've not removed, that again still have access into my tenant. So looking for all of those things first of all, identifying them, but we can also remediate them automatically as well in what we call playbooks. The baseline I mentioned, so the baseline is my golden tenant. In a perfect world, this is how my tenant should be configured. We have a built-in baseline into Configuration Manager based on CIS recommendations, so you can compare your tenant to those configurations first of all and see what's different. You can push out configurations from that baseline into your own tenant as well. Some of our customers have multiple tenants. Again, maybe I have a test tenant and a production tenant, and my test tenant is my blueprint effectively. So again, we can compare between those tenants to make sure that they are matching, and then also push out the policies to make sure that my tenant does stay to that preferred level. And as I've mentioned, being able to remove some of those admin roles. Again, if I'm on the service desk and I'm using Coreview to manage my tenant, we can remove their admin roles in the back end, so they just become a user, and then we use Coreview and Coreview permissions to control what they're doing as well. So again, reducing the number of admins that we have. ROI that I mentioned, so this would be, again, if I am managing the configurations in my tenant and I want to push out some changes, we have control within there as well, so we won't make any changes until somebody's approved that change. Again, as I said, backing up the configurations. Many of our customers have tools to back up data, but there's very few customers that are using or are backing up their configurations. Again, so they have no record of those configurations. If they do have a record, I've spoken to customers who are using Excel or a document to record all of their tenant configurations, and they'll go in and check every few months to make sure that nothing has changed, but they don't have a backup as such that they can refer back to. Sprawl I've mentioned, again, that growth of teams, sites that are sitting there unused or inactive, OneDrive sites, again, that may be sitting there orphaned or not in use, and identifying those. Understanding how users are using the Microsoft licenses assigned to them. Again, do I have somebody with an E3 or an E5 that is just using email, for example? And again, identifying that and then being able to take action on it. Either I train that user or give that user some awareness training on how to use the other workloads, or could this be a licensing conversation? Again, could I take a different license that's there as well? And the final topic is productivity. And again, I've mentioned if we can start to automate some of the tasks that I'm doing on a regular basis, we can do that with workflows. The tenant configuration, again, like I said, we can have a baseline. I can push out my configurations to a tenant very quickly. So instead of doing them manually, we can push them out again from a baseline or from the built-in baseline. Delegated admin, I've already mentioned, being able to delegate to an operator in a very granular way. And if we can delegate down to the service desk, they can start to resolve some of those issues on the front line, so that they don't have to go to second or third line. If we're empowering the front line to take actions, but we're doing it in a controlled way. Again, we're controlling what they're able to do with very granular permissions. We're giving them workflows so that they are doing things in a consistent way as well. And again, because we are using Coreview to manage the tenant rather than the Microsoft Admin Centers, I can potentially use non-IT people or very junior IT people to do some of those tasks through Coreview without them having to understand the Microsoft Admin Centers and where to find things. And again, this is just a summary of everything that we do on the Coreview side. So the tenant level configuration with our configuration manager, and these are the 4 types of configurations that we support currently. So my Intune configurations, Office 365, things like conditional access policies, Exchange policies, Teams policies, and then some Defender for Endpoint configuration as well that we're able to back up and manage. Management of my main workloads that I've already mentioned, again, Teams, OneDrive, Exchange. On-prem, I mentioned at the beginning that those hybrid environments for our customers who still have on-premise Active Directory and on-premise Exchange, we have some what we call the hybrid connector. So that allows us to reach out from Coreview, from my cloud management platform to my on-premise Active Directory, my on-premise Exchange. So when I am onboarding or offboarding a user, for example, I'm able to manage the on-premise user object as well as the cloud user object through the same interface, through the same workflow. And again, we're saving time there, and again, giving that visibility from one place. I've mentioned the third-party applications, so being able to identify those app registrations in my tenant, understanding permissions that they might have, again, certificates and secrets that are there, who owns them. We have those as reports out of the box, so giving that identity, that information, I should say. And we also have remediations that we can take. So in our governance center, that'll show you identifying some of those applications, but we also have remediations that we can run to take action on those as well. PowerShell. So this, again, if I have scripts that I'm running currently, we can bring those into Coreview. We can encapsulate them into a task effectively, but that means I can then delegate that down as well. I can give that task down to my service desk. I can give it to a non-IT person. It's just a task that they're running. They don't have to run that PowerShell. They don't have to, they can't even change it or anything with it. But again, delegation, I can delegate down. And the final point would be multi-tenant. So we can support multiple tenants. We can bring them together into one view in both Coreview and Configuration Manager. So I get visibility across all of my tenants from one place as well. That's my slides. You'll be pleased to know. So I'm just going to very quickly give you a quick introduction to both platforms. I'm going to start with Configuration Manager. So again, this is my tenant level configurations. These are my policies that are there to protect my tenant. We're backing those up every 24 hours by default. You can change that to be more or less often. We're using Azure DevOps behind the scenes. So that means that organization would belong to you. So all of those configurations are in your control effectively in a DevOps environment. We are planning, as I said, to bring our products together, but for now, DevOps is what we're using. And this is where I can then start to compare one tenant to another. I can look for changes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for my tenant. So this is my tenant today, and I want to compare it to my tenant 2 weeks ago, or however long ago. These are my backups. So I'm now looking for differences, differences between the configuration of my tenant today compared to the configuration of my tenant on the 26th of October. And this should come up in a second. So now I have 4 different views. So these are things that are in my tenant today that weren't there on the 26th of October, things that have been added. If there were things here, I could select them and say remove. These are things that were in my tenant on the 26th of October, no longer there. Again, I can go and see what those were. I can see what was the configuration of that policy. And if I wanted to restore that, I'm just going to select that box basically. We're aware of any dependencies. So say, for example, this was a conditional access policy that was assigned to a group. We'd be aware of that dependency and we'd ask you, do you want us to restore that group as well? But effectively, this is saying I want to go and recreate this configuration in this tenant based on the backup. And like I said, we won't make any changes until somebody has approved that change. So this will effectively sit as pending approval, and then somebody will need to approve that change happening. And then my final option is things that have changed. So again, I'm comparing now side by side. I can see that one of my configurations has changed. This is how it was. So this is how it was on the right-hand side. This is how it is now. So somebody's changed that particular setting. And again, I can come and just restore back again. And again, go and update my tenant, bring it back in line with how it used to be. So again, that would be comparing my tenant now, looking for any changes, being able to identify them, being able to roll them back. I mentioned that we have a baseline. So this would be if you wanted to understand how your tenant is configured compared to CIS recommendations. We have a built-in baseline that we've created. So again, you can compare your tenant now to our built-in baseline. And this will take a couple of seconds. It has quite a lot of data in here. But this would, again, allows you to compare your tenant to those recommendations that we have within the platform. Same principles. We're looking for things that are available in our baseline that you might not have configured in your tenant. We're also looking for differences. Again, if we have something, our configuration configured one way and yours is different. So these are things that only exist in your tenant, don't exist in our baseline. These are configurations that we have in our baseline that you could then push out to your tenant. So I can say, again, maybe this policy I want to go and push out to my tenant. We can go and see what it's in there. And I can say, yes, go and create this tenant. You'll see there are some that we can't do because they are managed by Microsoft. They're either default settings or managed by Microsoft. So we can back them up, but not necessarily push them. But the idea would be I can select a configuration. I can push that out to my tenant. And again, I could have multiple configurations that I'm pushing as well. Conflicts, again, same principles. So here I'm looking at differences. So this would be, again, my baseline. This is what we have in our baseline. This is your own tenant. And I can say, I want to come and update that to match. Again, if I wanted to go and take this description, we can just choose that and we will push that configuration out to my tenant as well. So like I say, Reconcile is doing a number of things. It's being able to look for changes on a tenant. It's being able to compare one tenant to another, looking for differences and bring them in line as well, all very quickly. So rather than doing it manually, I'm doing it through Configuration Manager. On average, and if I want to do a sync, 15 to 20 minutes, and I could have pushed all those configurations out compared to the hours that it would have done me, taken me manually. I'll quickly show you the sync window. So these are a couple of things that we can do within here as well. So these are my tenants that I'm managing. A couple of different things that I'll show you. So my schedule. So as I said, we're doing it every 24 hours by default. You do have that capability to do it more often, less often, on a custom schedule. Have that ability there. Filtering. So if you're only interested in certain configurations, such as Intune, pick your filters, and then we will only back up those configurations as well. Changes. Again, so if I wanted to understand what's changed in my tenant, so every time we do a backup, we'll compare to the previous backup and we'll identify what's changed. So backup is when I've made a backup from my tenant into Configuration Manager. We've identified that 5 things were removed. We can go and look at see what those configurations were. So these have all disappeared since the backup I did yesterday and the backup that happened today. And we can go and look at those details. I'll also you'll see some deploy logs as well. So deploy is when I've pushed a change from Configuration Manager into my tenant as well. So again, somebody's used Configuration Manager to go and delete something. And again, we'll see that in here, what that change was. So that's my visibility, first of all, in terms of changes that we've picked up. And again, getting that information. There's a few ways that we can get notification on those changes as well. So one would be a daily email. So we will send out an email every day saying, these are your tenants. This ones have had changes. These are what those changes are, or it's had no changes. And that, like I said, that's a daily notification that we can send. We can integrate with LBI, log analytics, and have some alerting, so I can be alerted that something has changed as well. And the final way that we can do, and I mentioned that we are planning to bring both our products together. So we have, this is our other product, Coreview. And this is our governance center that I'll show you in a second, but you'll see I have within here visibility of changes. So here we're pushing information from Configuration Manager into CoreSuite, and I can go and see what those that information looks like, and I have that again in a report I can go and look at. I can go and drill down to see what was changed in old setting and previous setting as well. So different visibility of those changes, as I said. That's Configuration Manager, as I said, which is our first product. I'm now going to talk about CoreSuite, which is our other product. So CoreSuite is the day-to-day management of my tenant. So Configuration Manager is the tenant level configurations, my policies. Coreview or CoreSuite that I'm looking at now is my day-to-day management. So we're reporting on the tenant. Again, we've got a number of reports out of the box that are looking at different aspects in terms of, again, my main workload. So Exchange mailbox sizes, permissions, and do I have any orphan shared mailboxes? Groups and group management, again, empty groups. Do I have groups, groups with memberships or again, empty groups that I might want to go and look at? Teams, empty groups, teams activity, teams memberships, teams phone, again, call queues, auto attendance, phone numbers, lots of different reports out of the box. Licenses, again, understanding license consumption, usage of those licenses, any wasted licenses we'll have within there as well. So again, this is identifying potential wastage. We're also able to drill down to understand what people are using. Again, have I only used Exchange in the last 30 days? We can see that through the optimization center. The Entra apps I mentioned, so these are the app registrations in my tenants, understanding permissions that they might have. Again, do I have any apps that have write access? Is it just read-only access? And again, understanding very quickly the permissions that these app registrations have within my tenant, first of all. Reports that we have are customizable as well. So like I said, we've got a number out of the box, but you can customize them. You can add your own information. And again, the information that we're getting, we're pulling in from multiple different sources. So again, you can then start to build a report based on all those bits of information that we're getting. Again, to create your own kind of custom report, export those out in different formats, schedule them. Again, rather than me going and looking for this information, we can create a report, put it on a schedule, and we'll just send it to you, however often you want to get it sent to, and whoever you want to get it sent to as well. So that's something we can do to save time, first of all, by getting visibility of that data more quickly, because again, we're interrogating a database that where we've ingested the data, rather than running a PowerShell script to collect it. And we can again put it on a schedule, so we send it out to you. We're a management platform as well as a reporting platform, as I said, so we're able to then take action within here. And again, different actions that we can take. 150, probably 160 now actions that we have built in. And behind the scenes, again, we're taking care of these tasks. So any PowerShell, any graph changes on the Microsoft side, we're going to maintain these actions. But again, it just means it's very simple actions that I can then go through and take action on. So user creation, user management, Teams phone management, Exchange management, again, some predefined tasks. Some device management through Intune as well. So again, being able to wipe devices or whatever. On-prem, as I mentioned, so with the hybrid connector that I mentioned, so this is where I can do some actions in my on-premise environment from the Coreview platform. Again, so on-premise groups, on-premise users managed through Coreview. A custom action, again, so it's those PowerShell scripts that we talked about, being able to manage and maintain and delegate those. Custom action is where you would do that in Coreview. So you're effectively creating your own action, your own PowerShell or graph script behind the scenes. Delegation, and I can delegate this down to help desk, non-IT person. As far as they're concerned, it's just their action. But again, it just allows us to shift left some of those tasks down to my support desk. So we're empowering them. They're able to respond more quickly to my customers' requests. And we're also freeing up time from the second and third line team, so they don't have to do some of those more mundane tasks. And then a workflow is where the automation would come in, so we can then start to automate some of those processes. Again, so my onboarding one, for example, building a flow, an automated flow, where we can then start to create a user, and we can have approvals, a yes, no, am I okay to do this? Creating a user here, again, with a hybrid connector, this could be an on-premise or a synchronized user. We're assigning licenses based on logic. Again, we're automating a lot of those processes that you might be doing manually. And these are management actions within the platform, but also custom actions, PowerShell scripts that you've created. We can send emails in here. We can integrate with third-party applications if we wanted to. So again, we can use some of the REST APIs that are out there if I wanted to, again, create a ticket somewhere or integrate with a third-party application. We can do that through a workflow as well. I'm going to go back to the Governance Center and talk about playbooks. So these are when we're talking about looking for those misconfigurations, we're looking at some of that risk management as well. So we have our policies at the tenant level that we're looking at on the configuration manager side, and then in Coreview we're looking at some of the best practice day-to-day things that I should be looking at in terms of managing my tenant and making sure that it's again that we don't have any misconfigurations there. That's what we call a playbook. A playbook is a collection of policies, and a policy is a rule, effectively. I'm looking for certain criteria in my tenant. These are the ones we have out the box, sort of 8 playbooks and about 50 or 60 policies now. And again, we're looking for some standard things. So licenses that are assigned to inactive users, we're going to identify those, but we also have remediation out the box as well, so we can automatically, again, we're going to automatically look for these users where their account is disabled, they have a license assigned. We're going to contact that user's manager. If we don't know who the manager is, we can nominate somebody else, send that manager a message basically saying, we're going to remove these licenses. Is that okay? And you can configure this as well. You can configure the content of this email. And if they say yes, the action that we're going to take is to remove licenses. If they say no, we won't do anything. We can put a timeout on. Again, so we give that manager 10 days to respond. And if they don't respond within 10 days, we have that choice of, do we do it anyway? We're just going to recover those licenses regardless. So we have a number of playbooks in the sort of out of the box in Coreview that we have created. All have predefined criteria, all have predefined remediation. So license recovery from inactive users, locking down inactive user accounts, removing inactive guest accounts, some of those app registrations, notify somebody that they have a certificate that's due to expire soon. Exchange, again, if I'm looking at shared mailboxes that are their account isn't blocked, or maybe again that they have no users, maybe they're reaching a certain size limit, and we wanted to be aware, because at this point we might have to assign a license to them. All of those things we're looking for, again, and we have remediations assigned to them. You can also create your own, so from reporting or from audit logs, create your own rules, create your own criteria, or your own remediation, I should say. So if you have, for example, 2 types of users in your organization, frontline workers who have a very cheap Microsoft license, I have my office workers who have the more expensive Microsoft license, and I want to make sure that the right license is assigned to them, and that they don't have 2 licenses. Set that as a rule or as a policy, and then have a remediation or a workflow that will then take action on it as well. And all of those come into the Governance Center where I started. So this is my day-to-day dashboard, effectively, in terms of understanding my policies, how many matches I have, so I can drill down to those 48 users, disabled accounts, I should say. I can run that remediation manually. I can put an exception in, if I knew that this person was on long-term sick leave, basically saying ignore this person and don't take any action. So as I said, the Governance Center is our view across the tenant. in terms of the policies that we have, policies that you've created yourself, understanding where I need to address, some of those misconfigurations. I can very quickly do so. We have a sort of an overview as well. So we've introduced scoring. So we're looking again across the policies that you have. We assign a score based on how many misconfigurations there are, and then get that picture within here as well of understanding what needs addressing effectively. We can also look over time, so I can see, am I getting better at this? Am I getting worse? Because we have that history there as well. So that's governance. Again, it's being able to get visibility, first of all, in those reports. It's being able to take action with management or a workflow. And then the governance center is where we bring those two together effectively. So we're automatically looking for things and we're automatically resolving them based on rules that are set, schedule that's set, remediation action that is set as well. So automating a lot of those day-to-day processes frees up a lot of time for the admin team. I'm not having to do this manually, but it also means we can start to introduce some security. If I'm locking down inactive accounts, if I'm removing inactive guest users, if I'm recovering unused licenses and making them available back to my tenant, if I can look for some of those app registrations that might have write access and take access on those as well. Lots of things that we're doing automatically to make life more efficient, I guess, and more secure from tenant management perspective. I'm going to talk about one more topic, which is delegation. And I mentioned the admin roles that we have on the Microsoft side that give me too many permissions. So the idea on the Coreview side is very granular delegation. So the idea would be, I'm on the help desk, you take away my admin roles. I'm just a user. I use Coreview to do my management. And then through Coreview, we control what I can then do. And there's a couple of things that we're controlling. So one is Coreview itself, the reports that we have, pick and choose which reports I can see. And again, I look after Exchange. Maybe I just get the Exchange reports and I don't get Teams, I don't get SharePoint, I don't get anything that's outside of my remit. That could include custom reports, reports that you create yourself. Which ones am I allowed to see? The user card I haven't shown you, but this is our single pane of glass view of a user. It's everything that we know about a user all in one place. What devices I'm using, what licenses I have, what groups I'm a member of, how many messages I've sent and received in the last 30 days. All of those, we can choose whether we show or hide them to an operator as well. So again, in this case, I can see Teams group membership information, but I get no visibility of Teams phone or Teams meetings information either, because you've decided, I only need to see certain information. The next would be the actions I can now take. So again, rather than using the Microsoft admin roles, we would use a permission set in Coreview. And in this case, I'm allowed to reset passwords and I can manage licenses. And that's all I can do. I can't do anything else. Workflows, again, I could delegate down to HR. They can onboard and offboard users. And they have those workflows that they can run, but nothing else. Again, very, very controlled that we're doing there. Those playbooks that we looked at, again, which ones am I able to see? And we have different roles and different permissions at the playbook level as well. So, I can read the playbooks, I can create them, I can remediate different roles within there as well. The final thing I'll show you, and I sort of mentioned this before, is a virtual tenant. So where the permissions are controlling what I can do, virtual tenants are controlling what I can see effectively in terms of objects within my tenant. And the idea would be, we would assign somebody to a virtual tenant, and that's going to control which groups am I able to manage. And I can, we can put a filter in. So I like to manage groups that start with UK in the name, for example. I'm able to manage users that are in France, and this is Entra ID information that we're using for this. So anybody that's in France, I can manage. Phone numbers, so anybody who's using Teams phone, this is almost like the concept of a number pool where we can assign a number of users, a number of numbers to a user that they can then assign through Coreview. For customers using direct routing, we can import those phone numbers as well, and then manage them through Coreview as well. Which devices I can manage. OUs, so again, if I'm using that hybrid connector and I'm reaching out to my on-premise Active Directory, which OUs am I able to manage through here as well. So again, it's very granular control that we're delegating down. And I'm just going to quickly show you what that would look like. So currently I can see my whole tenant. So I can see nearly 3,000 users. If you applied that virtual tenant to me, and bear in mind, I'm a super admin, so I can do this on the fly. But now I've been restricted down. I can only see those French users. I can only manage those French users. So 173 people, that's all I can now see in my tenant. And I have no visibility of anybody else. And we have customers who use virtual tenants to give that very granular control down to a department, down to a subsidiary. If it's a shared tenant and I want to delegate it down to a subsidiary or a local country so they can manage their own users. So again, very granular control that way. I'm not going to go into any more detail on those ones. So does anybody have any questions on things that I've shown you?
So thank you, Sharon, for your interesting presentation. And yeah, I see a few questions.
Okay.
So first would be, is there risks in having cross-tenant?
So what was the question in terms of cross-tenant?
Is there risks in having cross-tenant?
So what do you mean by cross-tenant? Is that in having copying things from one to
Maybe
another?
the person who texted this question could specify. While we are waiting, we can move to the second question. How much settings is possible to have in the baseline? Is there a list somewhere what can be added into the baseline?
Yes, so I can send you a link, or I can pass to Hermitage that they can pass to you. So we have a list of configurations that we currently support. As I said, it's Intune, Entra ID, Microsoft 365, and then Defender for Endpoint. But we do have a list of all the configurations that we can currently manage, and we have an article as well of what we have in our built-in baseline as well. So I can share those with Hermitage to share with you.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Maybe I missed this topic, but if I would want to take a configuration from tenant A and apply it to tenant B, was this covered?
Yes, so you can do that. So in Configuration Manager in the Reconcile window, let me go back again. So if I wanted to go and copy from one to another, I'm in the wrong place. Let me go back. This is what I want. So again, in my Reconcile window, so let's say that I have, this is the tenant I want to copy to. This is the tenant I want to copy from. I can copy from one to another either by selecting from here, but we can also choose to copy to another tenant as well. So again, if I come in here, I can say copy to. I don't have another tenant to copy to, unfortunately. But again, if I did have multiple tenants, I can either do it that way, or I can say, again, I want to copy from this tenant to my other tenant as well. And again, I would just come in and select whatever it is that I want to copy. Just going to pick one there, for example. And that's basically saying go and copy this configuration from Coreview PSA to Coreview PSA downstream. So that's copying between tenants. We do have, or we can use variables. So that would be, if I am copying from one tenant to another, there are going to be some unique settings on the other tenant, URLs, domain names, whatever. So we can use a variable that's saying if I am copying from tenant A to tenant B, change XYZ to 123, and we can do that through here as well.
Okay, thank you. I still do not see clarification on this first question, and no more questions, but we still have a few more minutes, so in case someone still would like to ask something, please use the chance to get live answers. If no, of course, as always, we invite you to contact us and to talk more. I will check once again. Yeah, so I see no more questions. So
Okay.
I would like to thank you once again, Sharon, for your presentation, and to all participants who join us today. Have a good rest of the day and see you next time.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for your time.
Bye.